예, 안녕하세요. 오늘 진행되는 세미나에 참여해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 저희가 4시부터 이제 시작할 예정인데요. 한 1분 정도 남았는데 저희 정각에 오늘 세미나를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 이제 4시가 돼서요. 오늘 스위스 금융권의 디지털 가상자산의 제도와 동향과 관련된 웨비나를 시작하겠습니다. 저는 오늘 진행을 맡은 법무법인 디라이트의 조원희 변호사입니다. 오늘 세미나는 Greater Zurich Area라는 단체하고 사카 스위스 아시아 크립토 얼라이언스와 같이 이제 저희 법무법인 디라이트가 공동으로 주최하는 세미나입니다. 아시는 것처럼 최근에 이제 국내에서도 법제에 대한 그런 논의가 많이 있고 STO에 대한 얘기도 많이 있는 상황에서 저희가 이 세미나를 하게 돼서 이제 여러 가지 뜻깊고 의미가 있을 거라고 생각이 드네요. 먼저 그 처음 시작을 우리 이제 그레이터 트리히 에어리아의 이제 시니어 프로젝트 매니저인 마이클 졸러 분께서 저희 환영사를 해 주시겠습니다. Mr. Joller, would you deliver your welcoming remark?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cho, for this introduction. I understood a little bit because I speak a little bit Korean. So thanks, first of all, for having us, and good morning from Switzerland, and good afternoon to Korea. I'm pleased to kick off this joint Korean-Swiss blockchain webinar, and would like to take first the opportunity to express my words of gratitude, of course, to the host and organizers of this webinar, SACA, Switzerland, as well as DLG Law Group in Korea. And in addition, a special thanks goes, of course, to our distinguished and internationally experienced speakers, Ivo Sauter and Matthias Kuert. Thank you very much. I haven't met them yet, but we live in the same city, or at least in the same region, so I think we can change that soon. Thanks, guys, for being here. Well, fintech, blockchain, crypto has attracted a lot of public interest in recent years. And I think Switzerland in general, but Greater Zurich area in particular, has evolved into a globally recognized fintech and blockchain hub. And there is, of course, some reasons behind that. I think there's really access to high-tech talent pool, leading research institutes like the ETH of Zurich and the University of Zurich, pragmatic and innovation-friendly regulators, access to investors, and of course also numerous large industry partners. So I would like to quickly share a few facts and figures with you. A recently published report found out that the number of blockchain companies in Switzerland has increased once more in 2020 and counts now already over 950 firms. Regarding the geographical location of these companies, they are mostly located in the canton of Zug, or in, as we always say, in the heart of the crypto valley. So more than half of these 950 companies have their base in the canton of Zug. If you add then also the canton of Zurich, there's another 20%. So you see that the lion's share, or the most companies in the blockchain crypto field, are really in the Greater Zurich area. In addition, the report also stated that these companies altogether, in the meantime, they employ more than 5,000 people. And the report also showed that despite of COVID, I mean, the last 18 months were really special. The number of companies plus also the number of employees is still increasing strongly. So these trends, of course, confirm that Greater Zurich area is an ideal location for blockchain and cryptocurrency-based projects and companies. And I think this would also be a great opportunity for Korean companies to use the momentum in evaluating also business expansion to Europe, to Switzerland, and especially to Greater Zurich area. Yeah, to conclude, maybe I quickly want to highlight some information about our organization, Greater Zurich area. We are a regional governmental investment promotion agency, and we will be or could be your business partner in helping you in expanding into Europe and Switzerland. We primarily act as a door opener and an intermediary, as we help international companies through the local ecosystem, the blockchain ecosystem, and we network them with the relevant companies, universities, research institutes, platforms, associations, and so on. Important to know for you is that since we are governmental, semi-governmental, all our services are free of charge. So you will never get a bill from our side. I think the cooperation, the collaboration between Greater Zurich area and SACA, plus also D-Light Law Group, is in an early stage, and we look very much forward to strengthen the ties, to work more closely together. And we have our own representative based in Seoul, Korea, John Kim, who is also attending this webinar. So please, if you have any questions regarding expansion, you can reach out to him. And yeah, that's it from my side. I think I already hand over to Ivo Sauter then, and wish all of you an insightful and instructive webinar and a great day. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Yeah, thank you for your welcoming remark and your support for this seminar. Yeah, can I have a question? Do you have any special program for the Korean blockchain company?
There is
finance or other resources.
Yes, there is some canton. I mean, we represent a total of 9 cantons, so 9 states, and some cantons, especially Zug and so on, they are very, very active in supporting foreign companies, also in supporting them to network. Financial support is rather limited in Switzerland, at least in our cantons, but we can surely have a deeper talk later on if there is an interest from the Korean side, what we can do for them and help them to expand to Switzerland.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your explanation. 예, 이제 그 미스터 졸로께서 이제 그 그레이터 주리히 에리아에 대해서 간단히 이제 설명을 해 주셨고요. 하여튼 이번 세미나를 또 개최할 수 있게 여러 가지로 지원을 해 주셔서 감사합니다. 자, 이제 본격적으로 저희 세미나 발표로 들어가겠습니다. 이번 세미나는 저희가 안내해 드린 것처럼 발표는 이제 영어로 진행할 예정이고요. 그 대신에 마지막에 있는 토론은 저희가 한국어로 여러 가지 이제 질문 사항들을 또 같이 모아서 이제 발표자분들께 전달해서 답변을 듣고 하는 시간으로 진행하겠습니다. 자, 그러면 첫 번째 발표는 이보 사우터께서 진행하실 텐데요. 6 디지털 익스체인지의 이제 CCO도 역임하셨고요. 그래서 스위스 금융권에서 이제 가상자산과 관련된 다양한 동향이나 제도들 잘 알고 있어서 저희한테 그런 내용을 잘 소개해 주실 것 같습니다. 자, Mr. Sauter, yeah, it's your turn.
So happy to start. Thanks a lot to the organizer. Feel honored to be here. Good afternoon to everybody. I would like to give a quick overview on digital assets for financial institutions, what we are doing here in Switzerland as financial institutions. My role at Gazprom Bank in Switzerland is Chief Digital Transformation and Strategy Officer. So I have our digital team as well as our IT and as our project team. And obviously we are quite active in looking at the digital assets, how this would change the financial infrastructure in Switzerland and what would it mean for banks here in Switzerland. So now looking at it, still suffering from some technical issues. Sorry for that. So, can you see my screen with the?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So if I look at the digital assets, I think the very new thing about it is that all the asset informations are included in the asset itself. So the full beneficial ownership information, which is included in the asset but not necessarily shared. In ERC20 token, that's obviously a wallet address if you do it the right way. Other bank-specific data which you could add on a sidechain if you need. Then obviously you need to include an asset identifier, an asset class, the asset class property, the asset servicing logic, and if needed, a member ID. So unlike where an asset is kind of stupid in the current situation and it's just an ISIN or another identifier number, we would add logic into the asset itself. This then allows us to communicate directly over DLT. In this case, this is sample around quarter hour 3, where we would share the asset details with 2 involved banks in a transactions, fully encrypted. It will pass through non-involved banks for privacy reasons, and it will go into markets and settlement surveillance, and if needed, to the regulator. So to show a bit what that would exactly mean and what the big change to today's world, I have tried to draw on today's world in terms of asset services. It's a very simple example. It's a dividend payment from the CSD. I took the Swiss CSD, which is SAS from 6, where a company would want to issue a dividend, and you see all the steps which are needed. Basically, the dividend needs to be notified to the payment agent. It needs to be notified to the CSD involved. Then it will be a notification to the bank where the client holds the asset, and ultimately gets booked to the beneficial owner. And this involves all these steps for a very, very simple a dividend transaction. It's mainly based on Swift. It's based on sending Swift notification and receiving Swift notification back until it's received and booked. If we look about how this would look like in the new world, and I think that's the very big changing part, is you can do everything between the buyer and the seller. So it means between the beneficial owners, getting them to the exchange, and doing all the asset transactions or the asset servicing in an automated way as well. So this is the example of the change of ownership, and given both of them are stored, all the information is stored in the asset itself. The asset servicing will look exactly the same, and I think that's a very interesting part. So instead of that, every house, and we know that in the traditional world very well, has to build their own automation. And for standard asset servicing, every bank has their automation in the old world. But as I stated before, the old world looks like this. So you have automation around the payment banks. You have an automation within the CSD. You have an automation with the receiving bank. In the new world, the automation can be end-to-end on both sides. And I think that's the very, very, very big advantage. So it's a big reduction of how assets can be traded. It's in terms of cost, in terms of risk, and it's a big reduction in terms of how an asset can be serviced afterwards, end to end. If we look what this new services bring for what kind of efficiencies they bring. They bring much easier access for the sell side to the buy side. So banks or companies which have balance sheet needs can transfer it in a much faster, in a much quicker way to institutions, to high net individuals, and at the end of the day as well to retail clients. Same thing happens for a broader client base, so beyond a bank. So there can be a company, a treasury in a company. They wouldn't necessarily need a bank for it anymore, or a bank would change their services much more to advise them and provide them technical infrastructure or support, and they can bring their assets in a much quicker, in a much smoother way to institutional clients. And last but not least, I mean, we still have roughly 70% of our assets are non-bankable assets, which so far are not handled by banks, and I would say institutional investors can access them. Ultra high net worth individuals can access them somehow, but for everybody else, they can't access them. And here with tokens, we come along with much smaller segregations. We can multiply tokens in a much smaller way. The reason for is all the cost efficiency we have, and that gives, I would say, the mid-tier private banking, high net worth individuals, and obviously, especially as well, retail clients, a much better access to a totally new asset class. Here, what we look at is efficiency gains, very much around the efficiency gains. So cost will go down tremendously. Financial cost, operational cost, but as well data cost, because everything on the blockchain is going to be can be accessed as well. Transactions costs are going down as well. And on the other hand, the business opportunities out of that is obviously a very much broadened asset universe. This is specifically due to non-banking assets which be added to that. Primary and secondary markets will be established. So far, assets which cannot be transacted or transacted only at a very high cost will be able to be transacting much easier. Not saying that the volume will always be much higher. That's obviously a goal, but it's a question of how many buyers and sellers you find. But at least the price for such markets will come down. This allows us to drive private markets in which all of the buy side participant can participate. And last but not least, it gives you an asset. It gives you access to global client access. So while today club deals are typically relatively regional, so you only have usually one set of clients. They're usually a small number of clients, and they're usually ultra high net worth individuals. This kind of investments can be opened down to retail investors if retail investors will be interested into it. Now, if I look a bit of what is happening in the market and what is needed for such a change, I would very much believe that at least 3-4 steps are needed in terms of adoption. So while we in Switzerland starting with that and have a very good legal framework, I would say internationally the legal framework still needs to improve. So in Switzerland we have the DLT law, and I think my colleague afterwards will talk a bit more about it, which the first part was implemented already beginning of this year, and the second part, especially around the marketplaces, will be implemented in August. So we have clarity how to operate with this kind of new assets. However, the Swiss market is a small market, and it's probably not sufficient just having the Swiss market. So on the midterm, we will need a broader understanding of legal frameworks internationally. So I think that's for me a very important point before we see much wider and increased adoption beyond Switzerland. The second important part, besides the legal framework, is that we have a stablecoin. And here, if we look at the current stablecoins, and if we talk about stablecoins, I think most people think about Tether. If we look at the current setup of stablecoins, there you treat volatility risk pretty much against credit risk. What is needed is a central bank stablecoin, or at least a stablecoin out of consortium of institutions which link it to some underlinings, which generates very much the reduced volatility. I mean, I'm thinking here of banking consortiums, but obviously the project which Facebook initially initiated could be a direction as well. But ultimately, to have banks and bigger companies operate in the DLT space, you will need to have a settlement coin which you can handle with low or non-credit risk, and which has a very low or no volatility. And the last setup is integration into the core banking system. So all the banks have already automation. All the banks have currently core banking systems. So what is needed are better APIs from this core banking system providers to connect to DLTs, to make the entry hurdle for a bank to have automated asset servicing for digital asset much smoother, because short term it's an increase of work, it's an increase of cost, but it's an investment for the future, where I believe cost will come down, and this new cost coming down will drive a lot of new ideas to what extent digital assets can be used. So we see at the moment digital bonds in Switzerland, a couple of digital bonds projects where discussions are between do coupons get streamed instead of paid annually or twice a year, and we see a lot of combinations between traditional assets. So I give an example. We see a combination between a loyalty coin and an equity as an example. So one of the skiing areas in Switzerland has such a coin, where everybody who buys a skiing ticket in their regards becomes a micro shareholder of that skiing region, and with that might get a discount for the next skiing ticket, or can in the future sell this micro holdings to somebody else who would like to collect maybe a bigger holding. So I think here a lot of projects are at the start. There's a lot of interest into it. The cheaper asset servicing allows, the more optimized asset servicing allows new ways of handling securitization, new projects around that, which I believe it's a mega trend for the financial markets, and something every bank here in Switzerland is at least thinking about and try to get the way around, more I would say fintech focused banks, they're trying to do prototypes already. With that, I would like to conclude the presentation and happy to answer questions. I can't hear you, Mr. Von.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a quick question about the AML situation in Switzerland. In Korea, deadline for the filing of digital asset service provider is coming near. So a lot of the service provider is preparing filing for AML, but that is a very complicated process. So they have a very hard time now. How about in terms of AML regulation?
I mean, I think we have very fair AML regulation. Probably the speaker after me, who has a bit more of a legal background, is even better to answer that. But I mean, we have in Switzerland banks, including Gazprom banks, who operate as well in crypto. So here we have very clear guidance how to look at it. So you typically banks cooperate with companies specializing in chain analysis and then look what coins are tinted or not. So now for digital assets, it's probably two stories. The question is it a freely traded ERC20 token, which is allowed to be traded in a public blockchain as well? Then it will follow similar AML guidelines than we have on the crypto part. The second part, is it on a side chain of ERC20 or even on a private blockchain, which some banks and the SDX is looking at the moment. Obviously, there it becomes even simpler. So obviously, everything in a private chain needs a bit of more understanding. You need to understand where those shares went through and come through. Typically, this can be solved that it needs some kind of register where you need to get an approval to be able to own the shares at the end of the day. So you need to go through mini AML or KYC in order to get a wallet in a way where then you can enable the shares or can hold the shares. I think that's probably the most common way at the moment. Does this answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we have a few. Oh, yes.
Yes, maybe it's Matthias and hello,
yeah,
everybody. Ivo already mentioned it. I'm covering crypto rather from the legal side, and I will also hold my presentation afterwards. But maybe just a few words on the AML applications in Switzerland. If, as let's say, crypto venture, for instance, a platform, which we often see, a tokenization platform, you would want to apply for an AML license, you can do so with a self-regulatory organization. And this is not the governmental regulator, the FINMA. And the process is not easy, of course, but it's still rather swift and not very costly. And once you have done that, you are as a rule compliant with the Swiss AML requirements. And then, of course, in the realm of the ongoing business, you have to do the necessary AML checks. But generally speaking, the process for so to speak being licensed as a service provider, let's say under the Swiss anti-money laundering laws, is not easy, but it's also not, an issue of several years and several 100,000 Swiss francs or so, but rather if you have a good project and all the necessary documents and internal regulations and people in place, such an application can be accomplished within, let's say, 3 to 6 months, and for 20,000 to 50,000 Swiss francs, and certainly not more. Just to give you a bit an overview of the processes.
Yeah, thank you for assuming the Korean company issue the utility token in Switzerland, is my understanding that company doesn't need to have any the license from the Swiss government, but have to abide by AML regulation in Switzerland.
That's correct.
Yeah, is it right understanding?
I think, as you said, if it's a utility token, it's different than if it's a security token. So maybe first of all, Switzerland has come up with some differentiation between different tokens. Now the question is it really a utility token and not a security token? I think there is probably going to be the big question. But for a utility token itself, it's much easier to issue it. Typically, companies ask then the regulator for a non-action letter.
제가 한 가지 궁금한 게, 아까 이보가 이제 발표를 하다가 궁금한 게, 아까 이제 스위스 어떤 리조트에 그 디지털 본드 상품이 이제 출시가 돼가지고 그거를 이제 거기에 토큰을 발행을 해가지고 그 토큰을 산 사람한테는 스키 리조트를 사용할 수 있는 뭐 할인권을 주고 그런 얘기를 했거든요. 그래서 그거를 좀 다시 좀 재밌는 케이스이기 때문에 좀 물어보려고 하거든요. So Ivo, you mentioned about this the digital bond product. By this company of the ski resort that they are issuing kind of blockchain loyalty vouchers, and then the issue users can buy their token and then they get a discount, and that's a very interesting test. Case. So would you like to a little bit give us more information and how is it going on?
Since it's just a project I saw from the sideline, I can't comment in detail to how well it went or not. But it was one of the first use cases. It was established. It was traded. It was a live use case, or it is a live use case. It was for sure a marketing push because it went through the media. To what extent it pushes numbers for the company, that's something which was not published. So it's difficult for me to comment on that.
So what is? I'm just curious. As you are the management of this, Gazprom Bank, I know you are offering a lot of plans to offer these crypto products and digital products. Could you give me some examples of your bank or other banks that you are aware of?
Yes, we are Gazprom Bank looking at the moment at a couple of things. One thing I mentioned already, we are looking at how to do a bond. We're talking to a company who has, or two companies who have interest in a digital bond. Obviously, as mentioned, one of the issues there, if you want to have in an automated way a coupon payment, you need some kind of settlement coin. There can be an internal settlement coin which you apply, then your distribution network is a bit more limited, or you can have a listed settlement coin, but there you have a bit of the issue in terms of credit risk. That if you for example have hold Tether or distribute Tether, you wouldn't really know how safe Tether is, and that's obviously an ongoing concern. So that's probably the two things Gazprom Bank are doing at the moment. If I look at other banks, I mean I see automated certificates where people try to put a token as a certificate. So and we see two companies, one bank and one broker dealer, which operate a private marketplace. And in Switzerland, it's an OTF, so it's itself not regulated, but can be operated by a regulated player, where clients can sign up on their OTF and then transact what they're doing. For example, a certificate in that case. But please keep in mind as well, the law is still very, very new in Switzerland. There are quite a number of POCs in the past, but adoption in a live productive environment only slowly starts now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. 자, 그러면 이제 우리 이보 사우터님의 발표를 마무리하고요. 이제 두 번째 방금 이제 답변할 때 잠깐 들어오셨다가 나가셨는데 마티아스 쿠에르트 변호사님의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 주제는 이제 저희가 이제 안내해 드린 것처럼 이제 STO와 관련해서 이제 스위스의 이제 DLT 법이 이제 어떻게 지금 개정 시행되고 있는지에 대해서 좀 자세히 말씀해 주실 예정이고요. 그리고 아까 제가 처음에 말씀드렸던 것처럼 우리나라가 지금 이제 STO와 관련된 여러 가지 이제 제도나 이런 것들을 논의하고 있고, 오늘 또 신문 기사를 보니까 이제 예탁결제원에서 STO 관련된 서비스를 이제 뭐 테스트이긴 합니다만은 준비하고 있는 것에 대해서 또 나름 의미 있게 생각하는 그런 기사도 봤습니다. 그래서 오늘 이제 이 발표가 저희에게도 많은 도움이 되지 않을까 싶습니다. Mr. Kuert? 마티아스 변호사님의 발표는 저희가 미리 이제 그 발표 영상을 받았습니다. 그래서 그 발표 영상을 저희가 바로 동영상으로 혹시 몰라서 저희가 받았고요. 그래서 동영상을 틀고 그리고 나서 이제 질문을 받고 하는 시간을 갖겠습니다. 자, 그러면 그 마티아스 변호사님의 발표 영상을 시작해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you and hello everybody again also from my side, and sorry for the slight technical issues. I will ask you, Chuhi and Wu, to go to the next slide once this will be the case. To briefly introduce myself, I am Matthias Kuert from the law firm CMS Switzerland, and I will present you in the next few minutes the new Swiss blockchain DLT laws and their impact on security token offerings. I will first provide you with a small overview and then focus on the instrument of the newly created uncertificated register securities and the tokenization of equity of Swiss companies, as well as the DLT trading venues. As Ivo already mentioned, we have new DLT blockchain laws in Switzerland. And these laws are not contained in one statute, but are amendments to 10 existing Swiss legal statutes. They have been approved by the Swiss Parliament in September 2020. The overall goal of the new laws is to accommodate the needs of blockchain or DLT or crypto ventures to create greater legal certainty for them. The main topics of the new laws are the creation of uncertificated register securities, which I will address in a moment. Then a new license category for DLT trading venues will be created, which I also will briefly address. And ultimately, another main topic are specific rules on the segregation of crypto-based assets and access to data in insolvency situations. Next slide, please. As you might be aware, and as also Ivo already mentioned, the Swiss regulator FINMA has introduced 3 token categories. The first category are payment tokens, respectively cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoins. The second category are assets, respectively security tokens, and the third category are utility tokens. The main focus of the new Swiss blockchain and DLT laws are security tokens and in particular security token offerings, and the focus lies here in the creation of uncertificated register securities, which are important for issuances on the primary market, and then the DLT trading venues, which are provided for secondary market trading. Next slide, please. When we come to the uncertificated register securities, the rules governing these are provided for in the Swiss Code of Obligations. And as Ivo also already mentioned, the rules are in place since 1st February 2021 and can thus already be profited from. The problem which underlies the creation of uncertificated register securities was that legal uncertainty has evolved around the question how rights can be represented on the blockchain, or in other words, tokenized, and whether they can be lawfully transferred without a written instrument. And there have been scholars in the legal literature that suggested workarounds, but it was never clear whether these workarounds are waterproof. Now, the Swiss legislator took on this issue and created the solution, which are these uncertificated register securities, which allow for the legally secure transfer of rights by way of an entry in a decentralized register, such as a blockchain. And that's the important point. Without that, a written instrument is required. Therefore, the new laws allows in principle to transfer rights, for instance, by way of a wallet to wallet transaction over the blockchain. Next slide. No, this is the right one, sorry. And there are obviously certain prerequisites to create uncertificated register securities. First, an agreement between the issuer, for instance, a company, and the investor that the right to be tokenized shall be entered into and can only be claimed and transferred through a register must be concluded, which register second meets certain technical requirements, which we will briefly discuss later. In any case, the agreement between the issuer and the investor is referred to as a register agreement. The main content of this register agreement consists in a clause that the right to be tokenized shall be entered into and can only be claimed and transferred through a register such as a blockchain. Furthermore, also further points might be provided for in this register agreement.
한번 보겠습니다. 네, 네.
Okay.
Can I continue, or do you have a question?
Please continue.
Okay. The register agreement can, for instance, be contained in general terms and conditions, such as the issuing conditions for an offering drafted up by the issuer and accepted by the investor. Next slide, please. And now these registers into which the uncertificated register securities can be registered and over which they can be transferred must also fulfill certain technical requirements, which I have provided for here on the slides, but I won't go through them in detail. What is very important for our clients and the projects that we evaluate for them is that from a practical point of view, the most frequently used public blockchains for token offerings, for instance, the Ethereum blockchain, but also permission blockchains such as Corda are suitable registers in the sense of these requirements. And also there are service providers in the market that offer solutions designed to comply with these requirements. Therefore, not every project, every STO project has to invent the wheel new, but rather service providers can be relied on. Then the next slide, please. What one has to, however, keep in mind, and here we come now to one of the most important use cases we expect in practice, which is the tokenization of equity shares of a Swiss company, which might be also a Swiss special purpose vehicle incorporated by foreign investors, for instance, or by foreign companies seeking to raise money. When we come to this use case, aside from the topics I already mentioned, further issues have to be kept in mind. And one of the issues concern regulatory topics. When it comes, for instance, to investments in real estate by way of a Swiss SPV, which is a use case that clients often ask us to look at, the Swiss collective investment schemes legislation must be looked at, which can entail licensing requirements that might be a showstopper, unfortunately, for projects. There are, however, exceptions to the Swiss Collective Schemes Act, in particular companies which are operative companies, which are producing goods, and also holding companies of such operative companies, such as Swiss special purpose vehicles, do not fall under the collective investment scheme legislation. Therefore, an important use case are really operative companies, manufacturing companies, companies in the services field that want to raise money via a token offering. Another regulatory issue that must be taken into account are the marketing requirements when it comes to the marketing, to the offering of a security token. Here, the main question obviously is whether the projects must draw up and have approved a fully fledged prospectus in the sense of Swiss law. However, also here there are exceptions. For instance, maybe you go already to the next slide. I'm sorry. No, now you went back, I think. The next one. Okay. This is. The slide should say use case tokenization of equity.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, this one. Yes, no worries at all. And here you see the points on the Collective Investment Schemes Act, which I mentioned, and now also the documentation requirements for the marketing of the tokens. And here, as I mentioned, the prospectus, which might have to be drafted up, but there are exceptions, and one important one is if you distribute the tokens only to qualified investors, professional and institutional investors, then you can profit from an exception. But for instance, also if you raise less than 8 million Swiss francs. Then the next slide, please. And here, beyond these regulatory topics, where if you want to tokenize assets by a Swiss a special purpose vehicle or a Swiss company more generally, then also the corporate law structuring must be taken into account, but I won't go into the details here, but if you have questions later on, I'm happy to answer them. And ultimately, and this is also important for projects, also the tax side must be looked at, since you want to know how the token offering is taxed by the Swiss authorities, whether you might profit from exceptions and so on and so forth. Then to finish my presentation, and this is the last slide. So the next slide, please. I give you a short overview on the newly created DLT trading venues. And here the related laws, as Ivo also already mentioned, will enter into force in the beginning of August, which is in approximately 10 days. The DLT trading venue license is a new license category which allows for trading in particular uncertificated registered securities on the secondary market. It might as well be considered as the counterpart to this uncertificated registered securities, the security tokens which I introduced beforehand, because here the focus is on the primary market issuing, and now on these DLT trading venues, these tokens can also be traded on the secondary market. But apart from security tokens, the DLT trading venues might also allow for the trading of payment tokens and cryptocurrencies, for instance, Bitcoins, and therefore the license could also be used if you want to establish a crypto exchange, a more classical crypto exchange in Switzerland. Noteworthy legal highlights of the DLT trading venues are that these venues might offer services in the areas of trading, clearing, settlement, and custody of crypto-based assets, of tokens. Therefore, the entire value chain of the tokens, of the token trading can be offered out of one hand. And what is also important, as opposed to classical stock exchanges where only banks and traders can participate in the new DLT trading venues, individuals such as me and you can participate directly, which obviously means, and this is also an advantage which Ivo already mentioned in another context, that you can skip quite a few intermediaries. And ultimately, the licensing requirements for crypto exchanges for these DLT trading venues are mainly modeled after the existing licensing requirements for traditional exchanges, which means that it remains to be seen how many companies will apply for such license. But what is also important is that there are exceptions for so-called small DLT trading venues. And here the licensing requirements will be more relaxed. I think you don't see the presentation anymore, but anyway, I guess it will be shared afterwards. And on the last slide, you also find the contact details, and I'm happy to answer questions now, but also if you want to reach out, please do so on as per the contact details which are included on the last page of my slide deck. Thank you for listening to me, and happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you for presentation. Yeah, we will share your slide after the seminar. 이제 세미나 일단 발표는 좀 마무리됐고요. 아무래도 이제 그 STO에 대해서 궁금하신 부분들이 많이 있으실 것 같아서 여기 채팅창에 그 혹시 질문 주실 부분들을 질문을 해주시면 우리 이주희 대표님께서 같이 이제 그간의 스위스 이렇게 설명해야 되겠네요. 오늘 이제 토론에 참여하신 분들을 제가 같이 이제 좀 먼저 소개를 드리고 그렇게 진행하겠습니다. 우리 이제 그 사카의 지금 대표로 계시는 우리 이주희 대표님께서 오늘 이제 그러니까 토론과 뭐 통역과 뭐 여러 가지 역할들을 좀 해주실 것 같습니다. 우리 이 대표님 잠깐 인사 말씀 좀 해주시죠.
네, 이주이고요. 여기 스위스인데 스위스가 지난주에 장마가 많이 와가지고 근데 다행히도 이번 주는 좀 화창하고요. 스위스 DLT로가 좀 좋은 example이 되는 바람에서 제가 이거를 같이 이제 조 변호사님하고 저기 김 대표님하고 같이 주최하게 돼서 영광입니다.
예, 그리고 이제 스위스 투자청의 김주연 대표님께서도 같이 참여해 주고 계십니다. 잠깐 인사 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. 마이크를
예, 반갑습니다. 지금 스위스 투자청이라고 소개해 주셨는데 저희는 스위스 추리히 투자청입니다. 스위스 투자청. 저희는 이제 아까 말씀드렸듯이 이제 9개 스테이트, 9개 칸톤 대표하는 투자청이고요. 그 안에 이제 저희가 그 크립토밸리를 이제 저희 그 리전 안에 이제 그 있어서 저희가 이제 그 기관하고도 이제 많이 협력을 하고 있고 이제 이번에 뭐 사카하고 또 딜라이트 로펌하고도 이제 또 좋은 관계를 맺게 돼서 앞으로도 이 블록체인 핀텍 분야에서 계속 좀 프로덕티브한 협력 관계를 좀 만들어 나갔으면 합니다. 예, 감사합니다. 그리고 참여해 주신 업체들도 그 크립토밸리라든지 뭐 사카라든지 이제 그 스위스에 이제 여러 그 협조할 수 있는 기관들이 많이 있으니까 뭐 앞으로 좀 계속 그 좋은 그 협력 관계를 유지해 나갔으면 좋을 것 같습니다. 유지해 나가면 좋을 것 같습니다. 감사합니다.
예, 감사합니다. 자, 그러면 하여튼 저희가 토론을 좀 하는 중간에라도 채팅창에다가 질문을 남겨주시면 그 질문을 이제 마티아스 변호사님한테 드려서 같이 답변을 좀 듣도록 하겠습니다. 제가 먼저 이제 질문을 좀 드려보고 싶은 거는 실제 이제 이 DLT 법이 시행된 이후에 액츄얼 케이스가 있는지가 사실 좀 궁금하고요. 그리고 실제 만약에 이제 이 프로세스를 다 따라서 이제 그 토큰 발행을 시큐리티 토큰 발행을 한다고 할 때 예상되는 기간이 얼마일지 그게 좀 궁금합니다. 그래서 그런 부분을 한번 여쭤보겠습니다. Matthias, I have a few questions. Is there any actual case after the DLT law enactment?
I mean, I really concur with Ivo that these laws are very new, and the market is a bit testing them. There are as Ivo also mentioned, there are projects which are done sometimes to show that it really works. But on the other hand, we are, for instance, working with a client on a tokenization platform, and this platform will be set up probably in Q3, Q4 2021, and over that platform, pharma projects can tokenize their equity shares, and we really hope that this project will go through. The investments which can be made over these platforms are usually in the 1 to 5 million range, and therefore the projects do not necessarily need a prospectus, and also the platform really helps the projects to cater for all the technical issues like those I mentioned, so that the projects really can concentrate on the investors and on the marketing of their security tokens to the investors, and do not need to take care of all the technical and legal stuff. That's the idea. And also we always, as I also mentioned, see a lot of interest regarding tokenization of real estate projects. But here, as already mentioned, it's a bit tricky because of the Collective Investment Schemes Act, because if you have to obtain a license as a collective in investment scheme, this is usually not feasible. But on the other hand, we have, for instance, a request from a company that wants to tokenize forestry, which are very long-term investments, and here we also hope that this project will finally issue the tokens. And what is interesting, maybe what we also see after the surge of the crypto prices in the beginning of the year is that classical ICOs, not security token offerings, are gaining momentum again. And here we have a project which should issue the coins at the end of August or so. But generally, as I already mentioned, I really agree with Ivo that it's important to look at projects. Therefore, obviously, also people from Korea are invited to reach out to us to discuss informally the project with us. And then the more projects come, the more use cases we have, the more other projects this will incite to come to Switzerland. But the big momentum is not yet here, but we hope that it will come.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it might be a silly question, but how long do you expect to take to acquire the collective investment license and satisfy the relevant requirement for issuing the secret token?
I mean, if you would really need a license as collective investment scheme, this is a rather lengthy process and might take you up to 1 year.
Wow.
But if you are, as mentioned, an operative company, a manufacturing company, and you want to issue tokens via a Swiss special purpose vehicle. If, for instance, a group of companies in Korea would say, let's try to raise money by way of issuing security tokens by way of a Swiss special purpose vehicle, then no collective investment scheme license would be required, and then in such cases the process in principle is rather swift. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. 그 혹시 다른 분들 질문 있으면 남겨주시고요. 예, 우리 이주희 대표님은 그 스위스에서 직접 이제 여러 업체들하고 같이 이제 뭐 그 예전에 유틸리티 토큰이나 이런 관련된 업무들을 계속 해오셨는데 요즘에 최근에 동향이나 이런 것들 뭐 저희 이제 한국 업체들한테 소개해줄 만한 게 좀 있으실까요?
네, 사실 이제 저도 방금 알았는데요. 이게 DLG 법이 보니까 이제 저는 시큐리티에만 해당되는 줄 알았더니 보니까 이제 유틸리티 뭐 이제 다른 익스체인지를 하는 업체들에게도 다 해당이 되네요.
네.
네, 그래서 정말 이제는 제도와 뭐 레귤레터리가 어느 곳에나 피해갈 수 없는 그런 게 됐잖아요. 그래서 뭐 피해갈 수 없으면 이제 당당히 뭐 즐기면서 맞서야 되기 때문에. 네, 지금 한국에서도 굉장히 많은 이슈가 있고 사실 제약이 많이 있는데 결국 이게 글로벌 비즈니스고 디지타이제이션 자체가 글로벌한 커버리지인데 한국에서 하든 이제 뭐 어디에서 하든 사실 그런 비용과 그런 이피션시를 다 갖추고 있는 그런 곳을 찾아서 하는 게 이제 비즈니스 입장에서는 굉장히 중요한데 이제 한국이 에서의 그런 상황이 있고 근데 이제 지금 제가 보니까 한국은 굉장히 지금 규제가 갑자기 들어와서 다들 이제 다 움츠리고 있는 상황인 것 같고 근데 제가 여기 있으면서 여기 프로젝트를 하면서 여기 사람들을 만나고 하면은 물론 이제 지금 약간 좀 주춤한 비트코인 가격이 떨어졌기 때문에 그런 건 있지만 전반적인 인프라 그게 제도화로 가는 그런 인프라에 대해서는 굉장히 활발하거든요. 그러니까는 이전부터 스위스는 ICO를 할 때부터 2016년 그때부터 이제 제도화를 정부가 사실 주체를 해서 이 ICO 자체를 가이드라인을 만들고 그거를 주체적으로 했기 때문에 그거에 대한 준비는 굉장히 앞서 있는 것 같아요. 그래서 지금 이제 한국은 사실 이렇게 리테일 마켓에서 이걸 끌고 가는 해서 정부가 억지로 따라오는 그런 이제 모양새인데 여기는 이제 정부가 밀고 가고 사실 스위스 국민들은 잘 몰라요. 그리고 이 사람들은 주로 이제 뭐 밖에 나가서 놀고 뭐 산에 가고 이런 거를 좋아하기 때문에 스위스 회사들은 어려운 점이 뭐냐면은 뭔가 법도 있고 텍스 뭐 이런 모든 제도화가 잘 됐고 하지만 커스터머가 좀 이렇게 스케일할 수 있는 그런 인구 자체가 스위스가 인구도 별로 없고 그런 이제 어려움이 사실 있기 때문에 이런 좋은 제도와 텍스 시스템을 가지고 정말 그런 매스마켓을 타겟할 수 있는 그런 두 가지 요소가 이렇게 결합이 되면 그게 사실 최상의 비즈니스죠.
예, 그렇죠.
예.
그간에 잠깐 이제 제가 질문해 주신 분도 있는데요. 잠깐 이제 한번 그간의 이제 상황을 좀 설명을 드리면 사실 이제 STO는 많은 분들이 관심을 많이 가지고 계셨어요. 그리고 실제로도 뭐 미국이나 스위스나 뭐 싱가포르나 이제 다양하게 STO 이제 프로젝트들이 진행이 됐었고요. 근데 이제 크게 나눠보면 어떻게 나눠볼 수 있냐면 지금 오늘 이제 DLT 법과 같이 STO를 위한 독자적인 법을 제정한 나라들이 있고요. 아니면은 이제 뭐 시큐리티 토큰을 위한 별도의 법을 만들지는 않았지만 기존의 이제 증권 관련된 규제 내에서 이제 STO가 가능하도록 그렇게 이제 운영을 했던 나라들이 있습니다. 근데 저희가 대부분 들었던 프로젝트들, 특히 미국에서 했던 프로젝트들은 이제 기존의 제도를 활용하는 건데 대개 보면은 국가들이 일정한 금액 또는 뭐 일정한 투자자 수를 넘지 않으면 이런 이제 증권 신고서라든지 이런 제출이 면제되는 그런 절차들을 대부분 갖고 있습니다. 그래서 저희가 그간 이제 언론을 통해서 들었던 STO 프로젝트들은 대부분 다 그런 이제 면제 절차들을 통해서 했던 경우가 많았어요. 그러다 보니까 이제 우리가 ICO 그냥 일반적인 유틸리티 토큰을 발행했던 것보다는 규모나 이제 투자자 수나 이런 것들이 많이 제한돼 있었죠. 그러다 보니까 최근 들어서 그게 아니고 그러면 기존의 이런 공모 절차까지도 이런 토큰을 통해서 할 수 있도록 그런 뭐 법이나 제도들이 좀 마련돼야 되지 않느냐. 뭐 이런 이제 얘기들이 많이 있고 그래서 이제 크립토에 좀 프렌들리한 나라들부터 이런 ST와 관련된 법들이 이제 제정되고 있는 상황이고요. 그래서 이제 스위스가 이 DLT 법을 통해서 STO가 가능하게 지금 만들었다는 거는 상당히 이제 의미가 있다고 생각이 됩니다. 그래서 저도 오늘 이제 얘기를 들으면서 제일 이제 조금 인상적이었던 거는 사실은 규제다라고 하면은 뭘 못하게 한다라는 개념보다는 우리가 이런 비즈니스를 하려고 할 때 법적으로 뭘 해야 되고 뭘 하지 말아야 되는지에 대한 이제 명확성을 주는 거죠. 하여튼 이런 이제 리갈리 클리어하게 이 절차를 좀 규정한다는 게 필요하겠다라는 생각이 좀 들었습니다. 그래서 오늘 이런 이제 뭐 구체적인 이런 내용이나 이런 것들은 조금 더 이제 보니까 법 내용을 조금 더 한번 보완했으면 좋겠다 생각이 드는데요. 그래서 그런 내용들이 조금 더 보완이 되면 이제 저희에게도 많이 도움이 되지 않을까 싶네요. 이 대표님 그 지금 질문 주신 분이 계신데요. 한번 좀 여쭤봐 주시겠습니까?
네, so Matthias here, we have one question. So in practice, yeah, well, the Korean company wants to apply for this DLT, let's say small DLT license, trading venue license, then how much budget is required? For example, I think there's like a deposit amount, the minimum you have to deposit for this custody.
Yes.
Also, there's license or the process, how long you can estimate to get the license. One question, and for this tokenization, is there any limited assets, amount of asset limitation? Yeah, is it depends on the
Yes.
license level?
If you want to apply for the license as a so-called small DLT trading facilities, then the minimal capital requirement would be at least 500,000 Swiss francs, and the trading volume would be limited to 250 million volume of assets in Swiss francs per year. And as regards the timeline, since this license, will be created beginning of August, it is that there is no practical guidance yet, but I guess one would have to talk to the regulator, to FINMA, which is fortunately possible. And I would, as a very, very rough estimate, say that within 1 year this should be feasible. But as I mentioned, it's not yet very clear. But if there is interest, what certainly should be done is to present the project to the regulator in a rather early stage and discuss and try to discuss the process and the timeline with the regulator.
네, 제가 이제 잠깐 토론을 해드리면 일단은 스몰 DLT 트레이딩 베뉴 같은 경우에는 디파짓이 미니멈 디파짓이 50만 프랑이 필요하고요. 50만 프랑이면 한 이제 6억 정도 되는 것 같아요. 예, 그게 디파짓이 필요하고요. 그 다음에 이제 이 경우는 그 볼륨이 250 밀리언 프랑, 그러니까 뭐 예를 들어서 이제 3천억 정도 되나요? 1년에 3천억 정도 볼륨을 한도로 해가지고 스몰 DLT 메뉴를 만들 수 있고요. 네, 그리고 기한은 아직 뭐 지금 이제 이 라이센스 자체가 8월부터 시행이 되기 때문에 지금 뭐 이렇게 구체적으로 말씀드리긴 힘들지만 뭐 1년 내에는 나오지 않을까 그렇게 본다고 하고요. 근데 제가 뭐 라이센스 이런 거나 뭐 이런 절차를 이제 스위스 저도 핀마랑 커뮤니케이션을 이제 여러 번 해봤는데 이 사람들은 항상 이제 우리나라의 경우는 그런 게 있어요. 이 라이센스 받는데 뭐 구체적으로 얼마 들고 뭐 필요하고 뭐 그거를 이제 먼저 이제 딱 요구된 조건을 먼저 받고 그 다음에 진행하려고 하는데 사실은 이제 여기 레귤레이터의 입장에서는 그럼 너네들이 어떤 서비스를 할 거냐 그걸 먼저 가져와라. 그러면 우리가 그거를 리뷰를 하고 그 다음에 답을 주겠다. 항상 그런 어프로치거든요. 그래서 일단 여기서 프로젝트 주체가 어떤 프로젝트인지 그거를 잘 먼저 구상을 한 다음에 그걸 가지고 이제 어프로를 받는 그런 식으로 항상 진행이 돼요. 그렇기 때문에 기본적으로 중요한 거는 그런 비즈니스 플랜 자체가 사실 중요하고요. 그거를 미리미리 핀마랑 커뮤니케이션을 잘 했을 때는 사실 1년 뭐 걸릴 수 있는 걸 더 빨리 진행될 수도 있고요. 사실 제가 봤을 때는 이게 사실은 스위스 정부에서도 어쨌든 간에 마케팅을 해야 되는 거거든요. 좋은 그 석세스 케이스를 만들어야 되는 입장이기 때문에 좀 좀 이렇게 처음에는 좀 이렇게 쉽게 너무 어렵지 않게 가는 여지가 많지 않을까 그런 생각이 듭니다. 답이 됐나요?
예, 감사합니다. 자, 그 두 번째 거는 답변을 주셨던가요? 그
네네.
토커나이제이션 오브 에쿼티.
네, 그거는 이제 스몰 DLT 베뉴의 경우에는 이제 1년에 뭐 3천억 트레이딩 볼륨 한도가 있고요. 그러니까 이제 스몰 DLT 베뉴는 그렇고요. 뭐 그냥 스몰이 없어졌을 때는 더 크겠죠.
예, 하여튼 스위스가 하여튼 새로운 실험들을 많이 하고 있어서 좀 많이 관심이 좀 있네요. 제가 이제 궁금한 것 또 하나 더 있는데 뭐냐면 최근에 이제 예탁결제원에서 지금 실험하고 있는 모델들을 보면 이제 우리나라에서 STO를 할 때도 사실은 이제 기존의 그런 증권 발행 절차하고 사실 거의 대부분 동일해요. 그러니까 증권사가 관여되고 또 예탁결제원 관여되고 또 은행도 관여되고 뭐 그래서 이게 이제 어떻게 보면은 그냥 유통을 블록체인 기준으로 해서 한다는 거를 제외하고는 사실 너무나 다 당사자들이 다 동일해서 이게 블록체인 기반으로 해서 이제 STO를 하는 의미가 뭘까? 사실은 좀 궁금합니다. 왜냐하면 이제 블록체인을 통해서 이렇게 한다라는 게 중간에 있는 그 인터미디어리들이 사실은 없고 조금 더 직접적으로 이렇게 할 수 있다라는 게 장점이었는데요. 그래서 지금 이 DLT 법 하에서 이제 시큐리티 토큰의 이런 발행이나 이런 부분에 기존에 이제 그 금융사들이 어떤 관여가 되는 건지 그런 부분이 조금 궁금합니다. 그래서 한번 봐주실래요? 아니면 제가 그냥 할까?
제가 뭐 간단히 여쭤볼게요.
예.
Yeah, here's another question from Mr. Choi. So I mean, he thinks anyway in this security offering, it's not very different from the traditional issuing securities or bonds. It's not, because that then the regulator is involved and the banks are involved, underwriters are involved. So then now we come to this new tokenized securities. And what do you see? What is the biggest benefit? I mean, when we are traditional model still works, no one complains. Maybe some complaints, but still works. Board very established. But then why do we have to go into this hassle? New license, new technology. What is the biggest benefit, in your opinion?
Yes, it's a fair question, but I mean, today for a private company to issue security, and in particular to transfer securities, you need either the banking system or you need to do the paperwork in order to transfer the security, collect signatures, and furthermore, without the banks or the traditional stock exchanges where everybody takes out fees, you cannot trade the securities on the secondary market. And with these new uncertificated registered securities, with these new security tokens, the idea is that you really can transfer the security by way of a transfer from wallet to wallet via your mobile phone without that you need any intermediary that take out fees. And that obviously also creates liquidity, since if transfer are easier, your shares are more liquid, and that's important for issuers. And then also on the secondary market, I mean, these licenses, that's true, they have to be applied for, but maybe in 1 or 2 years we have these exchanges, and then when these exchanges are, you can issue security tokens, and on these exchanges the individuals with needing a broker and so on
중간중간 조금씩 끊어지네요.
advantages which I see.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think, thank you for the answer. 결국은 이제 지금은 한국도 그렇고 뭐 여기도 그렇고 시작하는 단계이기 때문에 뭐 좀 햇슬이죠. 약간 뭐 아직도 뭐 좀 이게 똑같은 스텝이 필요한데 왜 굳이 필요하냐. 이제 결국은 이런 거를 갖추어서 디지털화가 되는 과정에서 피가 결국은 이제 중요한 게 유저 입장에서 피를 절감할 수 있고, 이게 뭐 피어투피어로 월렛으로 다 이제 결제하고 세틀먼트하고 이런 거 자체가 시간 지나면 그게 안정화되면서 결국은 이제 그쪽으로 다 옮겨가게 되는데, 처음에는 그런 질문이 나올 수 있을 것 같아요. 예, 변호사님이 하신 것처럼. 근데 이제 그걸 안 했을 경우에는 이제 좀 문제가 되는 거죠, 마켓 자체가. 그래서 항상 초기에는 이제 좀 이런 불편한 점이 있지만 결국 이게 자리를 가다 보면은 메리트가 그거를 도저히 거부할 수 없는 예, 그런 디지털 뭐 파이낸셜의 그런 예, 시대가 뭐 조만간 올 것 같습니다.
예, 하여튼 뭐 아무래도 이제 하나씩 또 진행해 보면서 이제 또 상황을 또 지켜봐야 될 것 같다는 생각도 드네요. 우리 김 대표님께서 혹시 첨언해 주실 말씀 있으실까요? 아니면은 우리 쭈리히 투자청에서 혹시 이제 한국 기업에 대해서 조금 준비하고 있는 게 있으시면 좀 설명해 주셔도 좋고요.
네.
마무리가 슬슬 또 해야 될 것 같습니다.
네. 사실 이 어려운 이 주제고, 사실 이제 뭐 저희는 이제 뭐 이 블록체인 그 자체 이제 전문가는 아니다 보니까 저희가 이제 뭐 변호사님이나 이제 그 이주희 대표님이 그 얘기하는 부분에 대해서 이제 저희가 뭐 깊이 뭐 그 첨언할 부분은 현재로서는 없습니다만, 이제 저희는 그 비즈니스 퍼실리테이터로서 공공 비즈니스 퍼실리테이터로서 한국 기업들이 그 스위스를 거점으로 아니면 스위스로 그 비즈니스 익스팬딩을 하고자 할 때, 그 다음에 이제 그 뭐 스위스 파트너들하고 이제 어떤 비즈니스 협력이나 현지 투자 진출 뭐 이제 이런 그 협력을 하고자 할 때, 이제 저희는 그 저희 네트워크를 활용해서 그 필요로 하는 이제 부분들을 저희가 그 뭐 도움을 드릴 수 있다라고 이제 말씀을 드리겠고요. 그래서 이제 그런 그 네트워크에는 아까 말씀드렸듯이 여러분이 잘 알고 있는 이제 크립토 밸리의 이제 여러 관련 기관들, 그다음에 이제 사카 같은 또 전문 기관들, 또 그 저희가 알고 있는 또 전문 그 로펌들, 뭐 이제 이런 전문 기관이나 업체들하고 이제 잘 연결을 해서 한국 기업들이 필요로 하는 부분들이 있으면 저희가 이제 열심히 그 파트너링도 하고 뭐 그 비즈니스 네트워크 이렇게 만들어서 잘 진행할 수 있도록 저희가 노력하겠습니다. 앞으로 그런 요구 사항이나 질문 사항이 있으면은 언제든지 연락 주시면 열심히 그 요구에
예, 감사합니다. 예,
따르도록 하겠습니다.
예, 감사합니다. 하여튼 좋은 기회 만들어 주셔서 감사하고요. 오늘 저희 이제 짧은 세미나입니다. 뭐 1시간 정도 세미나 하고 이제 30분 정도 이제 조금 질의응답하는 시간을 좀 가졌습니다. 그래서 저희가 이제 짧게 이런 세미나를 또 진행하는 거는 저희가 이제 한국에서도 제도가 계속 만들어지고 있는 상황이다 보니까 저희가 이제 해외에서도 어떤 제도가 새롭게 도입되는지를 저희가 계속 업데이트하고 또 관심을 갖고 살펴볼 때, 또 국내에서의 여러 제도에도 저희가 인사이트를 얻을 수도 있고, 또 국내 규제나 절차를 만드는 데도 좀 저희가 도움을 좀 받을 수 있는 것 같습니다. 하여튼 오늘 이렇게 또 어려운 주제로 이제 세미나에 참여해 주신 분들께 감사의 말씀을 드리고요. 아까 말씀드렸던 것처럼 저희 이제 오늘 했던 그 자료는 제가 이제 그 PDF로 좀 변환을 해가지고 저희 이제 홈페이지에 올려놓을 예정입니다. 그래서 오셔서 이제 그 자료 보시고 싶은 분들은 와서 가져가시면 될 것 같고요. 그리고 혹시나 이제 뭐 스위스 쪽에 대해서 궁금하신 거나 이런 것들이 있으면 그 자료에 있는 연락처로 이제 직접 연락을 주셔도 되고요. 아니면 뭐 쭈리 투자청이나 사카나 연락 주시면은 또 여러 가지 도움을 받을 수 있을 것 같습니다. 자, 그러면 이것으로 해서 오늘 저희 이제 세미나는 모두 마치려고 합니다. 우리 이주희 대표님 마지막 말씀 있으실까요?
네, 좀 아쉬운 거는 사실 이제 이 DLT 결국은 이거를 뭐 피카소 그림도 최근에 이제 뭐 시그너브라는 뱅크가 피카소 그림도 토크나이즈를 했고, 이제 모든 걸 다 파이낸셜화하는 투자할 수 있는 그런 구조로 바꿔나가는 과정인데, 제가 좀 약간 아쉬운 거는 약간 한국이 좀 그런 투자 마인드, 투자를 하면 왠지 너는 사기꾼이야 뭐 이런 식으로 보는 경향이 있는 것 같아요. 그래서 그게 사실 안타까워요. 왜냐하면 금융 소득이 굉장히 열심히 일해봤자 몇 푼 못 벌잖아요. 금융 소득은 굉장히 근로소득, 자본소득은 굉장히 이게 좋은 소득이거든요. 이렇게 많이 볼 수 있는 건데 그거를 건강한 투자 문화를 좀 이렇게 스위스처럼 파이낸셜 세타라는 장점이 있긴 하지만 그걸 한국 정부가 이런 투자에 대한 개념을 일반 사람이나 특히 이제 정부에서부터 학계나 아니면 금융 그런 기관이 좀 이렇게 적극적으로 이런 거를 좀 공부를 하고 해외에서는 이렇게 하는데 한국은 이런 상황이 있으니까 좀 이렇게 바꿔서 이렇게 해보자. 약간 그런 논의가 정말 많아져서 이런 투자를 할 때 정말 우리나라는 어디 채팅방 들어가서 그거 믿고 막 이렇게 투자했다가 다 풀딱 망하고 그런 경우 많잖아요. 그런 게 아니라 좀 공식적으로 전문가 집단이 정말 이렇게 교육하고 그런 제도가 그런 논의가 많이 이루어져야겠다 그런 생각을 하고 있어요. 네. 그래서 이 세미나가 그거의 하나의 연장선이 되었으면 하는 바람입니다.
예, 하여튼 그렇게 되리라 생각합니다. 하여튼 감사드립니다. Matthias, thank you for your very useful presentation. Yeah, it would be very helpful in Korea as well.
Thank you, Matthias. So,
변호사님도 오늘 진행하시느라고 고생 많으셨습니다.
예, 하여튼
중간에서 아주 알아듣기 쉽게 이렇게 잘 설명해 주시고 진행해 주셔서 너무 감사드립니다. 다음에 또 뭐 기회가 되면 또 더 좋은 이런 행사로 저희가 같이 한번 했으면 좋겠습니다.
또 오늘 참석해 주신 분들 다들 감사드리고요. 오늘 또 이제 편안한 저녁 보내시기 바랍니다. 자, 그럼 오늘 저희 이제 스위스 디지털 자산의 제도와 관련된 세미나는 이것으로 마치겠습니다. 자, 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 네, 수고하셨습니다.